The mark of the beast is something the churches love to preach about and scare people with, almost as much as the conspiracy theorists get into making hoax videos about malevolent laws and sci-fi technologies that they claim will eventually fulfill the prophecy. Through the years, we've been threatened with everything from UPC labels, tattoos, microchip implants under our skin, and tomorrow there's going to be another theory that's even kookier. For some reason, everybody loves to talk about and theorize about the mark of the beast, but nobody really pays any attention whatsoever to the mark our Father puts on His children. It too is found in the Bible, and it's also the key to interpreting, understanding, and recognizing the actual mark of the beast. So, why don't people know that this other mark exists? Well, because it's found in the Old Testament of our Bibles, and most of Christianity teaches that this 60% of our Bible is no longer valid, having been somehow magically replaced by the New Testament. That is obviously completely inaccurate. However, we'll save that for another study. But for now, let's start by at least familiarizing ourselves with the passage in Revelation that makes mention of this mark of the beast we're all so desperate to understand. It's in chapter 13, verses 16 through 18 of Revelation. It says, "And he causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. All right, let's change gears at this point and set the stage for the mark of the Father. Once upon a time, a scribe sought to challenge the Messiah by asking him what was the greatest commandment of the entire law of Moses. Here's the passage. It's in Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 30. "And one of the scribes came and asked him, 'Which is the first commandment of all?' And Yahshua answered him, 'The first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, Yahweh, our Elohim, is one, and you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment.'" You know, an interesting side note here is that the greatest commandment is actually not one of the 10 commandments written on stone. I only make mention of this because so many people today teach that there are only 10 commandments. Obviously, there was at least one more. But moving on, why did Messiah determine that this particular commandment was so important? Also, where does it come from? Before we try to get much deeper into the mark of the beast we found mentioned in the back of the Bible, let's look at the original mark that we find in the front of the Bible. What we're going to see is that Messiah called the first great commandment, this is actually the mark of the Father. And these two marks, the mark of the Father and the mark of the beast, are extremely similar. The two are so similar, in fact, that I think you're going to realize that the second mark is really just a copy, a counterfeit, designed to deceive the world. So here is the great commandment, the most important part of the law of Moses, from which Messiah was quoting. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 8, it says, "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. So, just like the other mark, on the hand and on the forehead. But let's put this passage under the microscope and see what we've really got in front of us. Toward the end of this passage, we read that this is a sign, meaning a mark, that goes upon our hand and between our eyes. Now that should sound really familiar, since we just got done reading that the mark of the beast is found in the same two places. But what else can we learn about this mark from what's written in this passage from Deuteronomy? Well, for starters, here's something interesting. We know this mark dates all the way back to at least the time of Moses, but we have no historical record of the Hebrews ever making or having permanent, visible marks on their hands and foreheads. So if this mark, the mark of the Father, isn't a visible mark, then what are the chances that the other mark that we're studying about, the mark of the beast, which is really just a copy of this one, what are the chances that it itself is a visible mark? The chances of that are pretty slim, but we'll see that more clearly, no pun intended, a little bit later on. When we look at the first part of our passage in Deuteronomy, we see that the actual words which constitute the mark give us three components: a name, a number, and a mandate. This is in the first part, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 8. This is back in the first part of that passage. Remember, it said, "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh, our Elohim, is one, and you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might." So what does this mark tell us? 1. Our God is Yahweh. This is telling us His name. 2. Yahweh is exactly 1. This is His number. And 3. We are to love Yahweh with everything we have and are. Now, a name is pretty self-explanatory, and a number, well, it is what it is. But what about that third item, loving Yahweh? I ask because everybody has a different idea of what love is and exactly how to do it. So let's look in the Bible and see exactly how we are supposed to love Him. Now these are just a few verses that illustrate this point, but this should make it pretty clear. Exodus chapter 20 and 6, "And showing mercy to thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments." Deuteronomy 7 and 9, "Know therefore that Yahweh, your Elohim, He is Yahweh, the faithful God, which keeps covenant and mercy with them that love Him, and keep His commandments, to 1,000 generations. Deuteronomy chapter 11 and verse 22, "For if you shall diligently keep all these commandments which I command you, to do them, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all His ways, and to cleave to Him." And even in the New Testament, we find the same language. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 2. "By this we know that we love the children of Yahweh, when we love Yahweh and keep His commandments." So the greatest commandment of the law is the mark of our Father. And it tells us that His name is Yahweh, that He is one, and that we love Him to the greatest extent possible, which means that we obey all of His commandments to the best of our ability. When we know His name, and we know His number, and we keep His laws, we are exhibiting the mark of the Father. Now that we have a solid understanding of the real mark, the mark of the Father, let's revisit that counterfeit mark, the mark of the beast, and we'll very quickly be able to decipher it correctly and without any more confusion. just by using plain and simple scripture in the appropriate context. To start understanding the mark of the beast, we should first figure out who or what the beast actually is. This is going to tell us where the mark originated. As many theories and interpretations as there are about the beast being an antichrist, a world leader, the devil, and so on, the answer is surprisingly simple, and it's written right in our Bibles in not too cryptic terms. The mark of the beast and a description of this beast are both found in Revelation chapter 13. In this chapter, there are actually two beasts mentioned, but the second beast only causes people to receive the mark, but the mark is of the first beast. So that's the one we want to pay attention to for the moment. And here is the description of the first beast from that chapter. Again, it's in Revelation chapter 13, and we're just going to look at verse 1, which says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." Now, that description doesn't give us the identity of the beast, nor does the rest of this chapter. However, there is another chapter in Revelation which describes the exact same beast, and this chapter does give us more than enough first-hand interpretation of the vision to identify the beast beyond the shadow of a doubt. Let's start with the matching description. Now we're looking in Revelation chapter 17 and verse 3. "And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." So this is the same beast, only with a little added interpretation of exactly what the woman and the heads represent found below in the same chapter. This is what's going to help us identify who or what the beast is. Let's skip all the way down to Revelation 17 and verse 18. "And the woman which you saw is that great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth." And then, jumping back up to verse 9, "And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits." So, the beast in question is a city, which sits atop 7 mountains or hills, and it is a city which rules, or at least has great influence, over all the kings, rulers of the earth. Well, a common moniker for Rome in the time Revelation was written was the city on 7 hills, and it's a nickname that's still used to this day. Now, there certainly are a few other cities which also sit on 7 hills, Rio de Janeiro, for instance, but how many of the world's leaders visit the Vatican to pay respects almost immediately after they take office? And how many visit those other cities? Having determined at this point that the beast in question is most likely to be Rome, let's revisit the mark itself and see what components it contains. Having already studied the mark of the Father, this should be a really simple matter at this point. So, back to Revelation chapter 13, we're looking back at verses 17 and 18. "And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. By now, things should be really coming together. Remember how the mark of the Father had a name and a number? Well, so does the mark of the beast. And since this is a counterfeit mark, we'll expect to see some obvious differences between the contents of the two. Remember, the mark of the Father told us that we are servants of Yahweh, and that He is one. So, has anybody in Rome ever tried to convince the world to worship something else with a different name and a different number? It just so happens that in the 3rd century, Rome declared their God to be a Trinity. And they determined that the Messiah that we read about in the Bible was actually not a man, but rather an incarnation of their deity, thus deserving all of the worship that before was reserved exclusively for our jealous God, Yahweh. Revelation 13 and 18, here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 6 is the number of man. We understand that very simply because we were created on the 6th day. And this number of the beast is the number of a man because this number was created by a man. And that number is a trinity of 6s. The name Jesus is now worshipped far and above the name of Yahweh. And the commandments Yahweh gave us to show our love for him have long been forgotten and ignored. The beast we read about in Revelation wasn't a single entity, but rather a matriarch who generated an entire global empire spanning centuries. Something else we read about this city on 7 hills is that she is a mother. Revelation 17 and verse 5, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. It's a matter of historical fact that nearly all of the over 40,000 sects of Christianity that exist today trace their roots back to Rome. And for all the alleged reform that happened along the way, they still worship Rome's Trinity. On Rome's Sabbath, Sunday, the first day of the week, keeping Rome's holy days, Christmas and Easter, which aren't found anywhere in the Bible, and following Rome's example of disobedience to the laws our Creator gave us. Study these 2 marks for yourself and make the decision. Who do you serve? How many is he? And how were we told to love him?